This is Chat Dragon, a talk show and actual play podcast about sci-fi, fantasy, and the world's most beloved game of make-believe, Dungeons & Dragons. My name is Jared, and I'm your host. I am a newspaper reporter by day and a dungeon master by night. I decided to start this podcast for purely selfish reasons, and that is to have a reason to talk to interesting people about interesting topics, all through the lens of D&D. Each episode, I talk to friends, family members, and tabletop role-playing creatives about this beloved hobby. The conversations are driven by dice, and the games driven by our imaginations. I guess, Trevor, now that we're in kind of a debriefing mode, how did it go? Did you have fun? Did you not have fun? What were you feeling?
Well, I had a blast. I had a lot of fun once I got to start murdering people. No, I'm kidding. Well, kind of. It was fun to kind of start using the environment. I'm glad we took the time to really fill out the space, because I feel like really it was the environmental stuff that wound up being my best weapon. I didn't really have any success with my sword. When I tried to use it, all I did was break Joseph St. Josephine, is that his name? Jason St. Josephine. Just broke his hand. So, yeah, I'm glad we took the time to do that. That was a lot of fun.
So, I guess since we're kind of doing the interview portion now, I guess, could you tell me a little bit about your, what's your background with D&D or role-playing games in general?
So, I haven't played a ton of D&D. I really only started playing in 2020. I would say, so first time I played was like Christmas, I guess 2019, with you and your son, and we did a Rick and Morty, what would you call that, play version? I don't know, game. And that was a lot of fun, and then we played a few more times, so it's, we kind of tracked the pandemic by D&D, because we played right at the beginning of it. It was the last in-person event that I did right before everything, all hell broke loose, essentially. And then, it was one of the first social activities we did virtually. And then now we're kind of back to playing again, now that things are hopefully seeming to come to an end. So, it's definitely kind of been a pandemic activity, oddly. But hopefully, it's a lot of fun, so we keep playing. I hope we don't need a pandemic to play.
Yeah. So how does this particular game compare to previous games you've played?
Well, it's interesting. I feel like this is maybe the most grounded game. I usually like to make my characters real eccentric, and it was an interesting aspect of the game to kind of keep in the back of my mind that, while part of the fun of this game for future guests will be to inherit what the previous player did to the character, but it definitely kind of changes the way I think about progressing and using that character, because I don't want to make it like inaccessibly outrageous. So that was definitely interesting. And honestly, I feel like a lot of the other times we've played, they're kind of more quest based, and so there's not a lot of fighting all the time. I mean, one of our previous games in particular, I guess I forced myself into a lot of fights because, again, my character was he was a real idiot. But I really enjoyed the fighting. And like I said, I thought the environment component was a lot of fun, kind of thinking through the things around me instead of just what, my character has on their person. So, yeah, it was unique.
Did you, I guess I'm kind of wondering, because normally when you play, you make a character, you might have a concept for a character, or you might just make up the character on the fly, but in this case you're kind of being given someone who has a little bit of a backstory. You're inheriting him, and people are going to inherit him from you, and so on and so forth. Does that change in any sort of way the decisions you make? Do you find yourself being more or less reckless in how you play, especially knowing that in this version of the game with these rules, these characters can wind up like injured with like serious injuries? Or do you think it didn't have an effect at all?
It did. No, it certainly had an effect. Because I don't want the character to be like totally wrecked by the time the next person comes. So I did think about it. And then there's honestly knowing that it might be also fun. So it's an interesting balance because on the one hand, I don't want to make it too too bad of a starting point for the next person that they can't really do much with the character. I also, though, part of the fun is to have to kind of inherit the scars and experiences. So it was, I think maybe when we started, I was trying to be a little bit more conservative with what I was having the character do. And then by the end of it, he's a pyromaniac madman. So, I guess there was some progression there. But yeah, it certainly made me be a bit more thoughtful.
How do you, I guess, too, I guess thinking about this, we don't really know Odd and the Sidekicks story before this, We know that they were in this card game, but without knowing what came before, what came after, how does that play into the way you role play, I guess? It's going to come afterwards.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think it was kind of seen when the game started. I was not quick, a character was not quick to jump in to involve himself, kind of knowing that a lot of Todd's other sidekicks, they don't always survive. So that bit of backstory was helpful. And then again, I wasn't trying to jump right into the fight. I was trying to de-escalate. So I think the backstory of knowing that you can't really rely on Todd, that Todd has a bad reputation, like I said, it kind of made me be a lot more hesitant to start.
Cool.
Did that answer the question?
I think so. I think it was really fun too how you you like jumped right in. You were very creative with like using the scenes, and I thought that was really fun and interesting to see you play through it because I feel like I've tried to introduce this sort of mashup of rules with other people, and certain groups they want very binary decisions. I have a longsword, I swipe with my longsword, not have to be so creative. So I guess when you I guess like what how do you I guess when you're role playing, what are some of the things you're like looking for in a scene to kind of because you seem like you're really good at it, you're a creative person, so what are some of the things you're looking for, or were you looking to, I guess what was your reaction, I guess, to that element? I know you said you liked it, so was it hard for you to kind of grasp at first, or because you seem to kind of just be natural at it?
Well, I think the fact that you did a good job of taking the time to let me populate it. So I kind of had some investment in it. You weren't just telling me what was around me. So maybe, it stuck out in my mind. And then you also made a point to explain that, yeah, you can use these things. So I think right off the bat, before we even started playing, I started thinking about it. And I guess what I look for is I want to, role play. I want to feel like I'm there. So it wouldn't be realistic to only fight with what I have, which is a sword. And plus I do think it's, I kind of want to be somewhat unexpected, just, I didn't anticipate doing any of the things I did. So it was fun for me too, just to kind of, I don't know, do things I wasn't expecting to do. I don't know. That's probably not a good answer, but honestly, I just thought you did a good job. It just kind of came naturally to start pulling the stuff out. And maybe it even came from the fact that, like, at first, again, I wasn't really trying to engage in a big fight. So I immediately was trying to de-escalate by using what was around me, and then it just evolved from there.
I guess just to kind of shift focus, I mean, I would say I probably started playing role-playing games a little bit before you, but not much for you. I was like pretty into board games for a while, but I always kind of really wanted to get into role-playing games. But I guess what for you, I mean, yeah, we're brothers, but we're in your late 20s. I'm in my early 30s, so we haven't lived with each other for almost a decade or more. So I guess why did it take you so long, do you think, to get into this stuff?
Yeah, I think part of it is because I was coming of age sort of at the same time that video games were really kind of hitting their stride. Specifically, online play really became much more of a normal activity for people. And so I think, in previous generations, if you wanted to hang out with your friends, you'd have to be in person, and kind of naturally you might find yourself playing board games, and then you just probably keep leveling up in terms of, complexity, or eventually you would get to a more role-playing type style like D&D. And so, for me, when I was in high school, if people wanted to hang out with each other, with their friends, well, they would just hop on Call of Duty. And I mean, that's still, I think, the case for a lot of folks, but I also think, we're probably at this point where it's a lot, people are now maybe looking just for other ways to engage with each other. And I would think maybe even during the pandemic, it was an interesting way when we're all craving human interaction to see and talk and be creative. And then, as we're coming out of the pandemic, it's a good way to be together with people, which I think maybe, wasn't always as high of a priority when I was growing up. So, yeah.
I know we talked about this in the past, but it sort of seems like we always had interests that were role-playing adjacent sort of interests, into reading fantasy, sci-fi. Our dad read a lot of fantasy. I think he played D&D when he was young. We saw Lord of the Rings, went to the comic book shop, did all that stuff. And it just sort of seems, for whatever reason, we just never found the right friends. At least I never really found the right friends in my early years that would have, I guess, even been an interest. This would have even been an interest for, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but.
Well, first off, yeah, I actually remember finding our father's dice, and when I did, being so confused by it, because I'm so used to just the standard die. So anyways, yeah, so definitely have very vivid memories of that. Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, I mean, I have friends who like fantasy, who enjoy kind of the same stuff, and I certainly think if I were to ask them to play, I think they would try it. I don't know if it's something they would enjoy doing all the time. I guess you never know until they sit down and play. But I guess I don't know. We were busy. I played some sports in high school, and then I don't know. I guess it just never happened. Like I said, video games always seemed to be the way my peers engaged with each other, and at that time, it was enough, unfortunately.
Yeah. I guess, too, I was kind of wondering, what are some of you've played a handful of times, and then we're on our second campaign together, and we did a couple one-shots. Who has been your favorite character that you've played so far? Why?
That's a difficult question. Because as I think I mentioned, all my other characters are kind of depraved. I don't even remember his name, unfortunately, but I feel like my favorite character was the one I was playing a druid at the beginning of the pandemic, and he was just I think he had like a bear skin that he wore, and he was this real, just kind of bestial, animalistic guy, a lot of aggression. But he had a really high pitched voice, so when he talked, I said it sounded like a squirrel chirping, and he was just a lot of fun because he always, because he had this like temper, and he would always just get into fights and absurd situations. So it was kind of fun just having to figure out how to get out of him, randomly getting into, just randomly getting into bad situations, I'll say.
He's a little bit self-destructive, would you say?
He's very self-destructive, yes.
I've been pretty particular towards I like your Genome character. He's a wannabe app developer in a fantasy world, which I kind of enjoy.
Yeah, that character, he's pretty fun. He's actually maybe one of my lesser, like, he actually seems kind of virtuous. Like he has his dream. He's looking for some angel investors to help get it off the ground. So he has high hopes for someone of smaller stature. So he's going to do big things, hopefully.
I mean, since it's D&D, you might literally get an angel investor too. It might be a holy being who comes down and gives you what you need.
I mean, I'll leave that up to the dungeon master, right? I gotta wait and see. So I'm into it though.
Yeah, I'll have to wait and see when I get in front of the computer and can type some stuff up. But saying, who knows?
I like it.
So I guess, one of the things that I'm hoping to do with this podcast, and we'll see if it works over the next couple episodes, is we just do kind of like some rapid fire questions, all done using our dice. We've talked about this before. We kind of did a podcast to kind of figure all this out. So I'm just going to have you use your D20 to roll, and then we have some questions. We'll just go through based on what you roll.
Perfect. How many times should I roll?
Let's do it one at a time. So maybe we'll do 3 questions, but we'll start with 1 and then answer that and then go to the next one.
Alrighty. 1.
Okay, so 1, what did you eat for breakfast today?
Oh, jeez. Well, I had a piece of whole grain toast with peanut butter, honey, chia seed, and cinnamon with a cup of canned coconut milk with turmeric and cocoa powder and coffee mixed together.
Sounds pretty interesting. And since this is a D&D podcast, what do you think your character today had for breakfast?
Marigold. I think he probably had some stale bread and some sort of like just starting to mold cheese. So it's a little fuzzy.
Oh, yeah? Do you think he drinks coffee or tea?
I think he drinks ale.
Ale? Is it like a coffee stout though, or something like that?
No, I think he goes more for the fruitier beers. He likes a delicate flavor.
So like what, like a grapefruit maybe, or a framboise?
Oh yeah, that's kind of what raspberry, or at least the one I think I've had. Yeah, I think more it's like a berry flavored, because berries are. I think that's something you'd more commonly maybe find. Like grapefruit, kind of specific, right? You got to maybe be in the right climate. But berries are everywhere. So maybe like some blueberry flavored ale.
I think framboise translates to raspberry. I think the type of beer you're thinking of is called Lambic. And it's like a wild.
Framboise is actually strawberry, I think, in French. Oh no, you're right.
And I think Lambic is like a wild. It's like wild beer using wild yeast that's just in the air or something like that.
Strawberry in French. I'm just doing my own research here. Oh yeah, okay.
Right, so he drinks fruity beer. I guess he kind of comes from an artsy background. He eats kind of crappy food. Do you think the food is a result of just the locales he finds himself in, or is it just because that's what he prefers to eat?
I'd say it's locale. I mean, well, first, he's a sidekick, so he's not making a ton of money. So it's really all he can get. Todd takes. I mean, I guess he's just starting out working with him, but going forward, obviously, he takes most of the gold. So he's not going to have a lot of money. So, and he cares more about having good quality drink than he does having, interesting food. So,
see. All right. Next question. Go ahead and roll your D20.
14.
14. What are some of the positives, if any, do you think there are from regularly playing D&D? Or any role-playing game, for that matter?
Positives. Well, I think first off, it's been really great in the pandemic, especially connecting with people who live in different cities, different states. The other game we're playing, we're playing with our cousin who lives in Chicago, and we're both in Michigan. So it's really nice kind of getting to see him more frequently than I really ever would otherwise. So I'd say that's really nice. And then just the general camaraderie, you talk before, you talk after. So kind of just that human connection, those bonds, that's great. And I think the imagination is fun. It's really, it is, you know, it requires probably a different part of your brain than you use throughout, you know, most of your day otherwise. So I really enjoy that. And storytelling, you know, that's another good quality that you kind of start to think about more. So, yeah.
I would say too, I mean, and I might be wrong or out of turn on this, but just as an adult, you know, you're not usually encouraged to be goofy, childlike, have a sense of wonder, and use your imagination. I watch my son kind of play and use his imagination. You know, we watch an episode of Dragon Ball Z, and the next thing I know, he's throwing Kamehamehas out at me, my girlfriend, our dog. And as an adult, you kind of get to this point, maybe you turn 18, and then life is supposed to be more serious. And so for me, it seems really nice because I get to act like a child when it's no longer maybe necessarily appropriate to be a child, even though it's within the constraints of 1, 2, 3 hours with these very specific rules.
I'd agree with that. I would agree with that. I'd absolutely agree with that. And, you know, I think a lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for how creative they can be. So I think if you already have that opinion, if you maybe have that opinion, I think it'll surprise people what they're able to come up with once they start playing.
I agree. And I think I've seen that with my girlfriend. She's not like the biggest fan of role-playing games, but she's tried to play them. And she always says doesn't really care for them because she doesn't feel super creative, like a creative person. And I think part of it is I was kind of in those early stages of being a dungeon master, so I was still kind of finding my voice, how to do it. But I was always really impressed when I did play with her because she usually would take the lead on with the imagination, coming up with things. And the people we played with were more sort of like trying to make those real binary decisions we talked about earlier, where it's sort of like, I have a sword, I use a sword, you know, whereas she is sort of, you know, I use that sword, but I don't know, I use it to reflect the light and blind the character or what have you, you know. And I don't think she realizes like how creative she actually can be. I think she's kind of an example of what you're saying.
Yeah, and I always really enjoy too. I think I've been fortunate because pretty much everybody I've played with, they get really into like the character and the personality traits. You know, we played with somebody else who their character was a thief, and he really did a great job of like every decision he made, he put through that lens. So it was really creative, and then, you know, our other game, it's very silly. So I really do feel like I've been lucky in that when I play, because you're very complimentary, and you said I did a good job of using the environment, but I feel like I've played with other people who are better at that than I am, and so it's always just made it really fun.
Yeah, I mean, there are games you can play and take it real serious, but I like game where you can joke and maybe your character does something that doesn't make most sense, like be an app developer in a fantasy world, you know. But I just think that idea is so hilarious that it's like we're gonna make it work or ignore that probably shouldn't be a thing, you know.
I appreciate that. Appreciate you not crushing my vision.
Well, yeah. We'll see.
So far.
Okay, go ahead and roll your dice.
Oh, sure. 11.
The question is, how long have you been playing D&D for? Which I think we already kind of touched on. You have only maybe been playing it for a little over a year at this point. So, on and off.
Yeah, and not as consistently as I would have liked. So I would still consider myself pretty new, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't even own any RPG dice until prior to this podcast, right?
No, yeah, and that's part of playing online over the pandemic, because I just didn't need them. The Owlbear Rodeo has a built-in feature, so I just use that primarily. There is something special, though. It's nice having the dice.
That was something I wanted to ask you maybe towards the end. Oh, there's a train going by in the background. But I wanted to ask you, analog or digital, in terms of dice or play experience, would you prefer to be in person with a character sheet in front of you or rolling dice, or do you prefer to have like using D&D Beyond, which we've used in the past, and rolling digital dice?
I'd say I'm analog. I like the tactile sense, I like the immediacy of it. I like feeling connected. I think ideally, if we could all play in person, that would be fun because it's
Sorry for the technical difficulties. During this portion of the podcast, we discovered that the Discord bot we were using to record our conversation had disconnected. My bad. Right. So we had a little bit of technical difficulty. The last question I asked, I'm not sure if it made it on the podcast or not, or would you buy way more than most people? And you had said books, correct?
Yeah, and again, I don't think I buy more than anybody else, but in terms of what I buy the most of for myself personally, I would say books.
Yeah. And I was trying to say that I tend to have an allergy to spending money unnecessarily, but I tend to, when it comes to books, make the exception. I buy a lot of books as well, and more than I can read. So
Same. I definitely have stacks around me. But I always like to have those because I feel like for me it's always kind of this pleasure of I have some other interest that gets piqued, and then I have a book that matches that just waiting for me that at hand I can go and grab. Like I had like a biography of Joseph Stalin, and I forget what I was watching, but it was something about Soviet Russia, and I was like, oh, perfect. Now I have this because it just kind of flowed and built off of that other thing I was watching. So I like having stacks. I don't feel bad about it.
yeah. What are you reading right now?
Right now I'm reading Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. It's a biography of Abraham Lincoln and his chief political opponents at the time that he then brought into his cabinet. Something about reading about a country, in conflict with itself is eminently appealing at the moment for some reason.
Sounds like a good book. It's nonfiction, I take it.
It's history, yeah. I know I've just said 2 nonfiction books. I prefer to read fiction, but lately I just have been really getting drawn into nonfiction or kind of political history, political philosophy type books. So the last fiction book I read, as I believe you know, was the first book of The Expanse. So that was that one called? Leviathan Wakes. That's what that one's called, I think.
What did you think of it?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was, I'd seen the show, so I knew what to expect. But I enjoyed it. I'm a fan of the world and kind of the grounded approach to sci-fi that it takes. So I liked it. I thought it really it hits its stride about, I don't know, halfway through when your 2 narrators meet up with each other, and then it really gets going. It's enjoyable. I'll probably keep going with the series.
I would say, like, for this show, I mean, this is way off in the future, getting one of those guys, because it's 2 authors, would be, like, pretty cool, because they're both role-playing game enthusiasts, and at least the one, I think it's Ty Frank. He was, like, George R.R. Martin's DM or something, and he created the world originally to be an RPG game, and then the other guy was like, hey, like, this would be awesome as a book series, and then they ended up converting kind of a idea for an RPG game into a book series.
I think Ty Frank may have been George R. R. Martin's assistant.
I think he was too, but there is an Expanse game, so, but I don't think it's based on the rules he originally created it for. So
yeah, he works as the assistant of George R. R. Martin and writes as James S.A. Corey with Daniel Abraham.
I would be surprised if that guy was still the assistant. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I don't know how old this. It's just kind of like the first recommended answer on Google, so it doesn't have like a date of when it was published. So that might be old.
Yeah.
He's had his own success, so I would be kind of surprised too.
Yeah. I mean, that I feel like franchise has really blown up in the last couple of years. I mean, last time I was at the comic book shop, they have comic books based off of the show. You know, I'm not saying he's writing them, but it's his property. I'm sure he's got something, you know.
He's got some royalties or something.
Yeah, something's gone. He's probably busy, I would guess.
For sure.
Say for me, I know that you didn't ask, but the book I'm reading is actually historical fiction, and it's Drood. And it's supposed to be about the last days of Charles Dickens's, or last 4 or 5 years of Charles Dickens' life. I guess he had written this book called something Edwin Drood, and it was an unfinished novel. So it's supposed to be about like these last 5 years, and it's fiction, so he, I guess, becomes obsessed with this person he encountered named Drood, and is like trying to search him out. At least where I'm at in the book, it's like an 800-page book, and I'm only like 70 pages in. And the narrator is his friend, who's also like an opium addict, or so his narrative, I guess, can be kind of unreliable. So you're not exactly sure if like everything like is the way it supposedly happened or whatever. So, and Dickens seems obsessed with this person, Drood, and he wants to seek him out, and he's going to like Limehouse and like Whitechapel and stuff. But some of the other people aren't really sure if he's a real person or not. So I'm wondering if he's just the character. I'm wondering if Dickens isn't like insane or something. But
interesting.
I don't know.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it seems interesting. It could be interesting. So
absolutely.
I guess maybe let's have you answer one more question, and then we can call it a day.
Okay.
Go ahead and roll.
5.
What scene in a movie always gives you goosebumps when you see it?
I would say, honestly, the scene in a movie, it's a sad one, but every time I have the opportunity to watch the movie Big Fish, I seem to always take it. And so that kind of final scene where the son is, I won't spoil anything too much, but like the son is embracing the kind of storytelling style of his father at a kind of a big poignant moment, and then it goes, and you kind of find out that all these stories that the son has gotten sick of and doesn't think are true, that his father tells about his life, you find out that they are true. You know, he just maybe dressed them up a little bit to be more interesting. And I don't know, it's a really poignant kind of I don't know, affecting scene for me. So Big Fish, that would be it for me, I think. Tim Burton's Big Fish.
Wasn't that a book as well?
It was a book. I thought about getting it, and then you have to be careful or take Amazon reviews with a grain of salt. But I think I was reading some, and I believe they said it's kind of different from the movie, and so something about it, something I read kind of discouraged me, so I never wound up getting it. But I probably should, because I really do enjoy the movie.
It was, when you mentioned Amazon reviews, it reminded me of something that is somewhat unrelated, but is an Amazon review thing. I was looking up like a manga, like I'm reading this manga series right now called The 20th Century Boys, which is it's pretty good. I don't have to go too much into it, but I was looking up some other stuff by the author, and one of the reviews, a 1-star review, because they said the comic was printed backwards. I've seen that on more than one review for manga comics, like people complaining that they're not printed the right way, and just not aware that it's how you read them. You read them differently in Japan. So.
Yeah, there's always a few really hilariously out of touch Amazon reviews. People don't understand. I forget what it was. I mean, I shouldn't even try because I really don't remember the context. But I want to say it was like some movie, like Children of the Corn will say, and then the review is like, this movie's not for children, 1 star. It's like, yeah, of course not. Like, come on.
Yeah, well, this person was like, I'm sending it back for a new copy. Hopefully it's right in the second one. And I'm thinking, you're gonna be disappointed, buddy, like, or lady or whoever.
That's so funny.
Anyways, Trevor, we've come to our natural awkward conclusion. Where
None better. That's how I do it.
So I'm thinking, as we conclude, we should just stare into each other's eyes on Discord for about 5 minutes, have it be real strange for the listener, and then I'll just shut it off.
Sounds perfect. Let me light a candle quickly.
Just kidding. But anyways, thank you so much for being my first guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully this becomes a thing we can do regularly. Have you back on, and you continue to play the character of Marigold Thundercrack. And
I say this with all sincerity. I hope it's not Marigold. I hope somebody gets real weird with him, and he doesn't make it that far.
Well, it could happen.
I mean, I guess that's not true. I hope he succeeds. I hope he has a good life, good character life.
I don't know. Maybe when he dies, we'll bring you back to be the new sidekick, first guest as the new sidekick.
Maybe, or you could force. Or I'd probably like to try and have to deal with other people's decisions. I think that'd be fun. Get that other aspect of it.
All right, maybe right before he retires, then.
Sure.
Missing an arm, a few teeth. Who knows?
Perfect.